Then I cried myself to sleep as silently as I could because the realization that David had been cheating on me for the past 4 months had finally hit me and I couldn't hold it together anymore. I cried the entire night away, but by the next morning, I was ready to confront David about what I'd found. I expected him to deny it or try to get me to forgive him, but he did none of those things to my surprise. He owned it and told me very confidently that he had cheated on me with an employee and everyone in the family knew about it as well. Apparently, he'd meant to tell me about it, but he thought that it would get in the way of having a child and he didn't want that right now because his parents were hounding him to have a baby so they'd have an heir for the company at the earliest. That was pretty much my only purpose as a member of their family, to present them with a kid so they'd have someone to take over the business eventually, and that's why he'd married me so early. According to him and my in-laws, these were my prime years and I'd have to have a baby soon. It was already bad enough that I came from such a financially weak background. The least I could do for them was give them a healthy child at the right time. He even had the audacity to tell me that he was getting stressed out because of my refusal to have a baby and the pressure that his parents had put him under, which is why he'd had an affair and he'd been honest with his family about it, so there was no need for me to get so mad since his parents didn't mind. Jessica was just his stress relief, but at the end of the day, I was the one he loved and I was his wife, so I didn't have to worry. After saying all that rubbish to me, he left for work that day without even waiting for a reply because he thought this was totally normal behavior. I packed my stuff up right after he left and snuck out of the house to go back to my parents' place where I told them everything once I got there. They had no idea how my life was at my in-laws' place because I'd never told them out of fear that there'd be a ton of drama if I did tell them the truth about how I was being treated by my husband and in-laws. After I found out about the affair, I realized there was no point in holding back anymore and spilled everything. My parents were very supportive and instantly put me in touch with one of their friends who happened to have a son, a divorce attorney. I told David that I needed some time to think and that I'd be living with my parents for a while, and he bought it. In the meantime, I worked out the divorce papers with my lawyer and within 3 days, he'd been served. He didn't see it coming because I hadn't mentioned anything about divorce even after I'd learned about the affair, so he was definitely taken aback the day he was served and came right over to my parents' house. He thought that he could argue his way back into my life, but in my head, our relationship was over and I'd accepted that, so his arguments were all pointless. He went back home disappointed that I wasn't staying with him despite his cheating, which just goes to show that he really did think of me as nothing but a huge pushover who could be bossed around all the time, and I'd stay nevertheless. The day after that, I received a call from my in-laws and Naomi told me that I'd pay for what I'd done to her son because he'd apparently been miserable once he realized I wasn't coming back. She told me that I'd made her son cry and that's why they'd make sure that I was absolutely destroyed in court. I told them I could handle it and then blocked them, but that was just all talk. I knew they were rich and influential people, so picking a fight with them wasn't exactly in my best interests. After contemplating for a couple of days, I decided to take a leap of faith and get in touch with Jessica. I remembered that they hadn't been on good terms in the recent past, judging by their texts, and I hoped that she'd be willing to help me out. After a lot of stalking, I found out that Jessica was actually an employee where David worked.